A major blow to President Obama's plan to address climate change. The Supreme Court has agreed to halt the plans to enforce until several legal changes have been made to his power plant issues. All rise, Judge Andrew Napolitano is here. This broke late last night. Exactly what happened here?
It is rare that I can use a word like always or never, and in this case I can use the word never. Take this to the bank.
With respect to the Supreme Court.
Correct. The Supreme Court has never done in a case what it did last night, which is reach down to a lower court where the EPA is litigating against states in a lower court. The case is not in the Supreme Court, and say to the lower court, you shall stop the enforcement of this regulation, this set of rules, until after you decide if the rules are constitutional. The normal route is EPA issues rules, the rules are enforced, people challenge them, they are enforced during the time period of the challenge. The time period of the challenge could take 6 months or 6 years. In this case, and I'll tell you why in a minute, the Supreme Court, after the lower court refused to stop the EPA, ordered the lower court to stop the EPA. Why? Because last year, the Supreme Court stopped the EPA from enforcing some rules. It didn't involve coal, as this does, because the Supreme Court held that Congress never authorized it to do what it did. Between the time it issued the rules and the time the Supreme Court ruled, the EPA had charged the businesses it regulated for enforcing the rules against those businesses in excess of $10 billion on rules that the Supreme Court invalidated. So to prevent that from happening again, the Supreme Court said, stop. You're not going to enforce this until the lower court rules, and then we rule.
And by the way, this power plant, I think it was Cato saying it's going to cost the economy $2.5 trillion, 300,000 jobs.
You know,
I mean, it's going to be extraordinarily expensive. But they center it all around, Judge, the Clean Air Act.
Yes.
And the way the Supreme Court has already interpreted the Supreme Court Act.
Yes.
I mean, the Clean Air Act.
The EPA has interpreted its authority under the Clean Air Act as being far broader than the way the Supreme Court has interpreted the EPA's authority under the Clean Air Act. And the EPA regulates in two ways. It says to the businesses, you're going to reduce the parts per billion of whatever we're regulating that you put into the atmosphere, in this case, carbon. And I'm just going to make up the numbers. You're going to reduce it from 1,000 parts per billion to 500. And then it says to the states, you're going to make sure that they keep it at 500. And the states are going, but you can't make us spend money. Don't worry about you spending money. We'll get you the money to enforce this. Where does that money come from? From the industries being regulated.
Right.
So those industries, in this example I gave you where the EPA was found to have been wrong last year, were charged $10 billion to enforce a rule against them that the court found the EPA didn't have the authority to impose. The Supreme Court's not going to let that happen again.
Ultimately, though, this probably will go to the Supreme Court to be heard.
Yes, and if the Supreme Court has the same membership on it, but when the case gets there as it does today, the EPA is toast.
I tell you, this is an absolute death knell to our power plants and, again, trillions of dollars. So
politically, it's on the front page of the Times because this is a legacy issue for the president. He hates coal. No matter what he told the people in West Virginia when he was running for office and running for re-election, he hates coal, and he's going to decimate that industry, and he's going to try and do it one way or another.
He's more than halfway there, even without this. Thanks a lot, Judge. Really appreciate it. Well,